Southeast Asia's diplomatic shift challenges. Xi Jinping's influence. Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent Southeast Asia tour appeared grand, with pomp and ceremony befitting a global leader. However, as soon as Xi departed the region, Southeast Asian nations swiftly coordinated actions that have left Beijing reeling. China now faces a sobering reality. Its allies are turning away, and even strategic moves intended to counter the United States have been undermined by these erstwhile partners. Beijing finds itself increasingly isolated, surrounded by a US-led coalition. What exactly has transpired? Before delving into the analysis, we invite our viewers to like and subscribe to Worldview Today for the most incisive political commentary. Xi Jinping's charm offensive across 3 Southeast Asian nations concluded recently. But no sooner had he returned to Beijing than a cascade of setbacks revealed the failure of his diplomatic efforts. From Singapore, Malaysia, and Cambodia, traditionally close to China, to South Korea, which maintains a cooler relationship, and India, ever cautious and neutral, the region seems poised for a collective pushback. Surprisingly, the first salvo came from Singapore, long considered China's staunchest ally in the region. On April 21st, Ching, wife of former Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, shared a provocative article from a Singaporean commentary outlet on Facebook. The article's headline was striking. Had Xi Jinping not become a hegemon over the past 12 years, China's global influence would be greater today. It accused Xi of imposing China's South China Sea claims on ASEAN nations, violating international law, militarizing reefs, and harassing foreign vessels. It further criticized China for hypocrisy in condemning hegemony while banning foreign companies, providing illegal state subsidies, stealing intellectual property, failing to open its markets, and erecting non-tariff barriers. The article also targeted Xi's Belt and Road Initiative, labeling it a debt trap that turns Southeast Asia into a dumping ground for Chinese goods. It concluded that global disdain for U.S. President Donald Trump does not make Xi a viable alternative. Unlike the U.S., which is trusted to honor agreements, China lacks credibility, making Xi's ambition to lead the world against Trump untenable. This was a bold pro-U.S. anti-China statement and a personal attack on Xi, shared by the wife of Singapore's former leader. Ching's post is significant. Lee Hsien Loong, who stepped down as prime minister last year, remains highly influential, and his successor, Lawrence Wong, was handpicked as the People's Action Party's 4th-generation leader in May 2022. Ching's decision to share such a sharply worded article, which remained online for over 10 hours, cannot be dismissed as a mistake. Singapore has long been China's closest partner, with its sovereign wealth fund, Temasek, allocating 19% of its portfolio, over 2 trillion yuan, to Chinese investments. For Ching to publicly label Xi a hegemon raises questions. Is Singapore unafraid of Chinese retaliation? This was not an isolated act. On April 7th, Ching penned her own post, arguing that since joining the WTO, China has reaped economic benefits without fulfilling its responsibilities. She praised the U.S. as a responsible global leader fostering freedom and fairness, despite occasional missteps. Her April 21st post appears to be a deliberate escalation, signaling Singapore's alignment with the U.S. after testing the political waters. Why this boldness? Singapore, with its deep ties to China, likely has access to insider information suggesting Xi's inability to retaliate. This move indicates Singapore's clear choice to side with the U.S., a message delivered informally through Ching to preserve diplomatic flexibility for Prime Minister Wong. Singapore's stance is not unique in ASEAN. After Xi's departure on April 19th, Malaysia, despite its outward deference, quietly undermined China. On April 21st, South China Morning Post reported that Malaysia Airlines is negotiating with Boeing to acquire 737 MAX aircraft originally destined for Chinese carriers, which China rejected amid the U.S.-China trade war. This move eases pressure on Boeing, neutralizes China's leverage, and signals Malaysia's goodwill toward the U.S. India is also vying for these planes to meet its booming aviation demand. China's rejection of Boeing aircraft has backfired. Not only did it lose substantial deposits, but its domestic COMAC C919 project now faces supply chain disruptions, and its Boeing fleet risks safety issues due to maintenance shortages. Meanwhile, Boeing benefits from immediate sales and reduced pressure, watching China stumble. India has further escalated tensions. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's visit, accompanied by his Indian-origin wife, Usha, underscored a comprehensive U.S.-India partnership in economics, trade, and geopolitics. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi publicly pledged to side with the U.S. in the trade war against China. Additionally, India imposed a 12% temporary tariff on steel imports for 200 days, targeting China's cheap steel exports to curb dumping, aligning with Trump's demands. Even Cambodia, long seen as China's vassal, acted decisively after Xi's visit. China invested heavily in Cambodia's Ream naval base, providing funds, personnel, and 2 ships worth over 100 billion yuan. The base's inauguration on April 18th, just before Xi's visit, was meant to showcase China's influence. Yet, the day after Xi's departure, Cambodia welcomed 2 Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force ships to Ream with a lavish ceremony, the first non-Chinese warships to dock there. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet had previously denied China's exclusive control, affirming the base's openness to all nations. Japan's warm reception of this policy sends a clear message. Even Cambodia seeks balance, avoiding total alignment with China. South Korea, less aligned with China, took a harder line. On April 21st, its customs service reported a surge in foreign goods, 97%, from China, falsely labeled as South Korean to evade U.S. tariffs. Valued at $20.81 million in Q1 2025, these violations nearly match the $24 million for all of 2024. South Korea's swift crackdown signals to the U.S. its commitment to fair trade, safeguarding its $130 billion U.S. export market and ongoing tariff negotiations. These 5 nations, South Korea, a U.S. ally, India, neutral but U.S.-friendly, and Singapore, Malaysia, and Cambodia, traditionally pro-China, have uniformly rejected China's side in the U.S.-China economic conflict, engaging in varying degrees of pushback. Trump's Ukraine proposal separately, President Trump's team has proposed peace terms for Ukraine, ceding Crimea, occupied by Russia for a decade, placing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant under U.S. control, and abandoning NATO membership aspirations. The plan does not recognize Russia's control over Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. If implemented, it could restore pre-Tushniu borders, with the U.S. and Ukraine signing a rare earths agreement. Trump supports allied troop presence in Ukraine for lasting peace. While controversial, this deal could allow Ukraine to reclaim Donbas territories, a reasonable outcome given its reliance on U.S. support. Acceptance might expose Russian President Vladimir Putin's intransigence, forcing a confrontation with Trump. Ukraine's response is expected soon. Global economic context. Trump's trade war reflects a broader unraveling of 3 global orders: economic, domestic, political, and geopolitical. Economically, unsustainable debt levels plague nations, with the U.S. running a $900 billion trade deficit and China holding a matching surplus. This imbalance fuels U.S. frustration as Trump seeks balanced trade through tariffs, not zero-tariff free trade. Politically, polarization between left and right destabilizes the U.S. and Europe. Geopolitically, nations are choosing sides, with most aligning with the U.S. against China. For Xi, these collapses are acute. China's post-reform economic order has crumbled under his policies, with overcapacity and bad debts stifling growth. Politically, Xi faces challenges but retains control. Geopolitically, China is isolated as allies pivot to the U.S. Trump has set 3 traps for Xi. First, escalating tariffs expose China's refusal to negotiate fairly. Second, China's potential sell-off of U.S. treasuries would incur losses and weaken its financial position. Third, nations like Singapore and Cambodia are abandoning China, prioritizing U.S. markets. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned that China's retaliatory tariffs could lead to delisting Chinese firms from U.S. exchanges, devastating their $1.1 trillion market value and harming China's elite. What are your thoughts? Like, comment, and subscribe to Worldview Today to join the discussion. Your support helps us reach our 100,000 subscriber goal. For those inclined, you can buy us a coffee via the link below. Thank you, and we look forward to your insights in our next commentary.